Welcome into another episode of the Young Terps podcast. Mason Reiner and Ahmed Gafir. Ahmed, we've hit the bye week. Let's start off with a little bit of football. We'll talk basketball media day in a second. How are we feeling after that tough loss?
Yeah, obviously, it's a very disappointing game coming out of that. Definitely going in, very winnable game. I think everyone kind of expected Maryland to kind of take care of business. And, when you kind of just look on paper, look at Illinois, the way that the run defense kind of looked going into the game and chance for Maryland's running attack to kind of pick up the pace. The bad penalties, it felt like was probably the worst performance to have a 2-week break until your next game, I would say. But, you know, again, it goes back to what we said last episode. I think just Terps on Terps. Just kind of reviewing it again, just felt like the defense just gave up too many of the dumb penalties, and I think that ended up being really the difference. And the turnover by Caden Prather was proved to be a momentum swing, and just felt like a complete game of what ifs. Obviously, the good chance that you're able to get a couple of these starters back after the Illinois game, but I think it just chance to kind of reset the standard, what's expected, and gonna get your mind right before that Northwestern game on the road.
Yeah, I think the standard is the phrase that like it always is for Loxley, and that's going to be the rest of the season. Looking forward to Northwestern. Obviously, we'll have that preview, but just big picture wise, look, you got to boil it down to one thing. You lost a game you probably should have won. Now it's time to steal one, and the Terps got two chances to do that if they want to right the ship and hit that 9-3 mark that I think has been thrown around as really where this team should be given the schedule.
Yeah, obviously, I mean, 9-win season that includes an upset against either Michigan or Penn State now, and again, Northwestern, that's not a gimme game. I think kind of going into the season, maybe I kind of cautioned Nebraska. I think I did initially say that I think it could be the highest scoring game, but you just don't know what that Nebraska team's going to look like. And Illinois, they kind of were expected to be a little bit better and had a little bit more of a down year. Northwestern was kind of supposed to be bottom of the barrel after the Pat Fitzgerald news, but they look good through at least the first 4 weeks of the season. So just don't think that game will be a gimme at all for Maryland. It kind of goes back to like what you said. Illinois, definitely a game that Maryland should have won. And I think even at the end of the season, when you look back at the season, I think that will end up being the game where every Maryland fan says, "Man, what if?" Because that could alter bowl projections. Citrus Bowl has been a frequent visitor in College Park through that first half of the season. So again, like you said, I think it goes back to the Maryland needing to take care of business. Now I think that they should be able to beat Northwestern. Nebraska, I think they are the better team, but it's still a road game, and we'll see on Penn State, Michigan. I think both of those teams are kind of looking really strong right now, and obviously Penn State has a big game this weekend against Ohio State.
Yeah, I think many times before it would have been called fan speak, but I think at this point it's just realistic. Is Maryland's got to win some games in October and November at this point to prove themselves as a program. I think that really down the next month and a half to 2 months, that is what this needs to be about for Loxley and his staff. This isn't only about this team. This team has a chance to accomplish something great, to have Maryland's best season in the Big Ten. All that stuff, those doors are still open. There's still an opportunity to get some wins down the line. I think it really turns into becoming him proving himself that he's a good coach past September. Now him proving that his program's in a place that he said it was in at the beginning of the season. One of the things that's bothered me from Saturday, not to spend too much time on this, is when in the press conference he said this is still a developmental program. Well, a couple months ago he was saying this program's ready to compete for Big Ten championships. So I think at this point it's which one is it? Pick one and go with it, and whichever one it is, you got to live up to that standard. Again, using his words, live up to the standard. Well, what is that standard? And he certainly set that bar high at the beginning of the season. Seemed maybe it was a little bit reactionary just in that moment, but backpedaling on that back to one of his old talking points of it being a developmental program.
Yeah, and in the same breath, you hear, I mean, really the last 2 years, a lot from Loxley about, he believes Talia is one of the best quarterbacks in the country in the Big Ten. You look at that 3rd and 6, given outside zone Antoine Littleton, essentially took the ball out of your best player's hands. So I think that's another factor that kind of just hasn't really gone away just yet. So yeah, obviously, like you said, just kind of resetting those expectations. But yeah, I think every Maryland football fan, I think they kind of had this, and whether you're a diehard or you're someone that just kind of watches from afar. I think every Maryland fan kind of does have this image that Maryland in September. That's kind of when Maryland does best. So when you talk about Loxley needing to prove that he can win in October and November, yeah. And obviously, it's not going to get any easier with USC and Oregon on the schedule next year. Or UCLA, excuse me, or no, Oregon's next year. UCLA is 2025. But again, this is really the team that's primed to do it. Just kind of felt like through those first 5 weeks, and I said it on numerous occasions. I know we kind of both echoed that same point, but that this Maryland team does feel a little bit different. This past weekend showed that this Maryland team showed flashes of some of the same Maryland teams that we've seen in years past. So again, it's just kind of getting back to that and being able to kind of get away with that stigma of not being able to win when it matters.
Yeah, certainly. A lot of talking points going into the bye week, and not many of them on the bright side, which is, I think, what everybody would have predicted this time a week ago.
It would have been glorious to be able to go 6-1, bowl eligible, going into that bye week. Just ton of buzz, especially the week after Loxley was named midseason top coach in the Big Ten by the AP. So definitely a missed opportunity there.
Yeah, certainly is one. And from missed opportunities onto a season of opportunities, let's talk some basketball. But before we get into that, it is pool closing season, and our sponsor, Watercrafters, has everything you need, whether you're in Montgomery or Howard County. Watercrafters has been providing pool service and supply to those areas for the past 41 years. Watercrafters has all your needs for your swimming pool in their showroom in Gaithersburg, Maryland. You can visit them online at watercrafters.com or stop into their store in the Gaithersburg Air Park. Ahmed, basketball media day yesterday. Let's start off with the man at the helm of the Terps basketball program going into his second year, Kevin Willard. What did he have to say?
Yeah, obviously, I think he kind of helped set those expectations kind of for that returning trio, obviously with Jameer Young, Dante Scott, Julian Reese. Julian Reese was pretty blunt. He said, hey, we expect him to kick ass. It's just kind of what he does, essentially, just kind of paraphrasing exactly what Willard said there. But, with Jameer Young, kind of really talked about his ability to kind of slow down and be able to read defenses better, play off the pick and roll a little bit better. Just him coming from that Princeton offense over at Charlotte to the heavy pick and roll offense in year one under Willard. And then, he again, it seems like every time he has a mic in front of him or he's on a podcast, he's reiterating the confidence in that freshman class. And, yesterday he talked about Deshaun Harris-Smith, Jamie Kaiser Jr., and John Lamothe, all those guys being able to come in every single day, staying consistent with those morning workouts. So there's a lot of confidence. Obviously last year, what Maryland fans looked at, and I think Maryland fans took note of, to being able to kind of maybe maximize, or the guys that had their roles kind of maximize those roles and that match preseason expectations. But, Willard noted, sometimes we're able to go 6, maybe 7 deep, but, this year he noted being able to go 9, 10, 11 deep. So obviously Caleb Swinton, Roger down low. He's that guy where he's able to take that next step. He reiterated that confidence. Jordan Geronimo, again, you talked about the physicality that he's been able to add. That's another point that came up. But then obviously the biggest point came in maybe the last 2-3 minutes of the press conference when Willard noted that Maryland and Georgetown should be resuming and beginning the 2024-25 season. It was pretty interesting to note, I think a lot of fans, as soon as Ed Cooley became the head coach over at Georgetown, felt like it was a matter of when, not if, Maryland and Georgetown would be able to find their way back onto the court together. And Willard noted that it was on Maryland's end this season that they weren't really able to find a date. It seemed like the Asheville tournament, that early tournament this year, caught a lot of shade during the press conference, but granted, it's pretty weirdly scheduled, so I can't say I blame Willard there. But definitely, when you think of the schedule news and whatnot, being able to play against Georgetown, I think is something that every local fan welcomes. And Willard did add that they will be playing in the Empire Classic next year as well, to add some confidence to that non-conference slate.
Yeah, immediately addressing what I think a lot of fans I guess, noticed year over year with this team, which is played an incredible schedule in the non-con last year. And then this year, not many ticket selling opponents on the docket for Xfinity Center.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely heard from some people saying, why don't you ask Willard these questions? And, definitely. Granted, I think Willard, especially after year one, kind of embracing the need to schedule a little bit tougher in the non-conference slate. Think he's kind of providing that rationalization as to why Maryland kind of wasn't able to maybe beef that up. Whether good or bad, it is what it is. But I think when you kind of look at what the future, I think that kind of just adds confidence that Willard kind of gets it. It was also interesting to note, obviously, with the additions of USC, UCLA, Oregon, Washington, just with the Big Ten slate potentially going from 18 games to 22 games, and kind of limiting that non-conference slate who you're able to play. Obviously, first two games usually smaller school, and you go, maybe a non-conference or a bigger marquee matchup, things like that. So yeah, obviously, like you said, you're just kind of being able to beef that up and kind of energize the fan base in College Park that a lot of fans have desperately been looking for quite some time now.
Yeah, you mentioned that, and then the first thing that sticks to mind, it's the perfect time to bring that Georgetown game back. You don't really have to travel far. If you start looking at some of those West Coast trips that are going to be this point are, all but done, that you're going to be out there probably playing 3 games in the span of 9 days or 10
Yeah.
days. Um, being able to find a Power Six basketball opponent, within your bus trip radius, within where it's easy for your guys to do.
Yeah.
You'll see those games, those regional rivalries, killed by conference realignment or not. I'm fairly confident just across the board you're going to see those games pop back up, because those are the teams where it's easy to get to, where you can still say that's a quad 1 or quad 2 win come March. And when you look at the team this year, I think that you kind of know what you have out of your Jameer Youngs, Donta Scott, but it's really, you mentioned Calum down low. I think you're going to see Jordan Geronimo in the same breath with him of what can Maryland really get out of their end of rotation players. Because every coach right now seems to be saying their team is 10 deep or 8 deep at a minimum. When it comes down to Big Ten play, do you really expect those guys to be on the floor this year?
Yeah, and I think that's valid. And I think down low, I think a lot of people wanted Caleb Swinton Roger to be able to take that next step, and he was able to generate that buzz in Italy. Obviously, the competition level wasn't great, but just kind of being able to showcase that he's kind of capable of it, and I think he's going to be that primary guy. Obviously, Braden Pierce, the freshman, 7 foot 7 footer, maybe likely a year, maybe two away from kind of being that integral piece. And Willard did caution some just patience with Maddie Traore there, the forward over from New Mexico State who joined the program this summer as well. You see it when you watch him play. I mean, just a long frame that has that length, that rim protector. So you can just kind of see him just kind of growing into his body, just kind of having everything click a little bit. So I think obviously Big Ten play. I mean, Maddie would probably have to be more of someone's in foul trouble, or just end of the bench, just kind of maybe 1 or 2 minutes here or there. But I don't expect him to kind of be that integral piece. But obviously what Pat Emilian was able to do last year, they lost him, and I think that was a guy that probably became a fan favorite, second to Jameer Young there. And obviously just kind of replacing his production to Jordan Geronimo, the transfer from Indiana. Willard talked about him being able to just add that physicality, but then when he touched on what he's done to be able to help Maryland win on the road, and he pointed to Geronimo saying, hey, he knows what it takes to go on the road. So you expect him to be an integral piece, probably 4 or 5, and Dante Scott to be able to play a little bit of that 3 as well. So to kind of add some versatility there, so in at times. So definitely will be interesting. But like you said, every coach feels pretty confident about their depth, but it does feel like there are multiple newcomers that can be those impact pieces.
Yeah, and I'll kind of stick to the guys that are on the roster right now and the impact they need to have. And I think Jahari Long and Noah Batchelor kind of go in that same line. You're somewhere, it feels like you look at this team and you look through a lens of, you kind of know what the rotation is going to be with the big guys, what your big hitters need to do. Then you have a group of freshmen that everybody seems to be hyping up, talking more and more about. And then you really have some of those key pieces. What do you get out of Jahari Long? What do you get out of Noah Batchelor? Obviously, we talked about the front court. Depth seems to be king these days in college basketball.
Yeah, I agree with that. But I also think, Jahari Long, I think, Maryland doesn't need him to be a scorer. They don't need him to be, I mean, he can, if he can add to the perimeter shooting, think after last season, there will be no fan that is going to say, "Oh, we don't need that." But I think he's a guy that can kind of come in off the bench. Obviously, Deshaun Harris-Smith, we kind of expect him to be that starting guard alongside Jameer Young. He can also play point guard a little bit, but I think Jahari can just be that guy to help the offense, just facilitate the offense a little bit. And then Noah Batchel, I mean, that's a guy, him and Jamie Kaiser Jr. But those guys, I think, were probably 1A, 1B, with maybe Kaiser being 1A there on Maryland being able to improve their perimeter shooting from a year ago.
Yeah, and that's something that's obviously on the top of I think the wish list of many Maryland fans as this season comes around, is what the perimeter shooting is going to look like, where it's going to come from. Ultimately, I think year two of a coach, right? It's you brought in a lot of pieces, like you already mentioned, Pat Emilian, guys that kind of fill those gaps. Year one, now you start to see a program build, and in year three, you'll probably see the kind of the team that Willard wants to have on the floor. Realistically, as much as the portal can play into that, and other pieces can come around and help you out, it does still take a little bit of time to get your guys on the court. And I think this is, if we're going to see it, to me, this is the transitional year, even though Maryland's been anywhere from 19 in the Fox Sports College poll coming to 30 something this year in the AP poll. Honestly, I really don't exactly know what to expect out of this year's team.
Yeah, I think this Maryland team, they were also picked in that, I guess, unofficial Big Ten media poll, finished third in the Big Ten there. I think Maryland definitely has the makings to challenge for a Big Ten run. Obviously, Purdue, Michigan State, they definitely are the top dogs at that race. But when you talk about just the returning pieces and kind of what's expected of Deshaun Harris-Smith and Jamie Kaiser, John Lamoth is another guy. I think maybe he's a guy that it'll be interesting to see just how integral in the rotation, what his minutes look like Big Ten play. But I think he's another guy. He's been kind of praised for being that combo guard as well. But yeah, I think Maryland being able to just kind of find that scoring. I think that's going to be the primary question there.
Yeah, if they're going to make a run, I think it is scoring. That's what it's going to come from. Who's your secondary scorer after Jameer Young? Can one of your freshmen step up and be, maybe in that one and done conversation? Can Harris Smith really be the guy that everyone's saying he can be? There's a couple of those things, and right now I think it's just, I kind of caution everybody, and usually I'm on the optimistic side, but I kind of caution everybody when they talk about this team and the run they can make. Yes, the pieces are there. They're going to take those hits when they get on the road. You're going to see them be, I think, really challenged by what is just a brutal conference to play basketball in. Being the Big Ten, it's a very physical league. Generally, it's dominated by upperclassmen, and a team like Maryland, they might be able to get out and run and score, but do they have it down low? Did they find the depth in those key places? And that can really only be seen the way it's scheduled. Maybe you see some glimpses of it at Villanova, but ultimately conference play, as always, will define this basketball team, as it does now every team with the 20-plus game schedules that almost every league has.
Yeah, when you talk about just the physicality, I think, it goes back to Jordan Dronema just kind of being able to add and just kind of solidify that front court rotation. Obviously, what does Caleb Swainton-Roger look like in extended minutes in Big Ten play to be able to fill, maybe 10, 15 minutes a game? But, Julian Reese, there's no denying that, one, he struggled to kind of stay out of foul trouble. So that's still going to be, priority number one for him. And then, being able to kind of stretch the floor for Julian Reese, being able to open up the floor a little bit, just kind of for others. That'll be kind of interesting to see. Obviously, Julian's been kind of working on that through the offseason. You kind of saw him again before practice yesterday, working with Greg Manning, and you can kind of see the mechanics look a little bit better, but still kind of a work in progress. A little bit feels like a little bit of a hitch just on it before his release there. But I think just kind of being able to solidify that rotation, and then again, it goes back to Jameer and Deshaun, how they're going to be able to kind of play off each other a little bit. And if Maryland can find that perimeter shooting consistently, I think it opens up the floor spacing for a lot of these guys to be able to find their space, whether Jameer or Dante or Juju down low.
Yeah, a little bit less than a month before the Terps tip it off at Xfinity Center. Ahmed, give us some keys. I know we've kind of been going back and forth through it. Give us some keys to what you think makes a successful run for the Terps.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting. Obviously, I think this Maryland team is probably built a little bit better to make a tournament run. I could see a Sweet 16 run. I think it's possible just kind of with the returning vets, what they've been able to do, and then you look at the incoming pieces that are expected to kind of be those key contributors. We haven't really drilled into Deshaun Harris Smith a ton. I think he's a guy that Jamie Kaiser Jr. Obviously he's a guy that has the work ethic, and he's very focused and driven. And I think that's something that even from when he picked up the Maryland offer for football, it was very evident that he kind of was mentally very mentally mature. But Deshaun Harris Smith, I mean, every single time that Willard has spoke about him, he hasn't been shy. He's probably the most talented freshman that he has had the privilege to coach. No doubt that freshmen are freshmen. They're not going to be at their absolute best day in, day out. But I think just kind of him being able to to kind of shoulder the load from Jameer a little bit. I think you kind of saw that last year from Don Carey, not being able to really provide much consistency. Obviously, able to do a little bit with the 3-point shooting at the beginning of the season. Then he was able to heat up in the last stretch there before before Maryland lost to Alabama in the tournament there. But I think just kind of him being able to kind of pick up the slack a little bit from Jameer, I think will really be able to help Maryland. And then lastly, I think it'll be interesting to see just what Maryland's defense looks like. I think Willard cautioned just what the defense, how aggressive he's going to get just kind of in that first year in the system. Now he's in year 2, and he hasn't been shy in the past that we're going to ramp up the press, the pressures. And, that relies on your freshmen kind of being on their P's and Q's there. And, whether it's full court, I think the half court traps, I think last year, I think a lot of fans kind of welcome that new defensive style. So how that looks and especially how that looks on the road, I think will kind of determine Maryland's overall success until March.
Yeah, for me, you took my first one with your last one. It's what does that pressure look like? What does year 2 of the system really look like? I think it's something that's a little bit overlooked in the modern era of college basketball with all the transfers, with the big freshmen. Is a good system really can't be beat. If you look at Jay Wright's Villanova teams, if you look at the success that North Carolina has had over time, they do get big recruits, but ultimately their systems prevail in the long runs and into March. I think that really seeing Willard talked a lot about. I mean, you and I were at his Rolling Road Country Club when he did a sit down with the Babe Ruth Birthplace Museum last year. And he was talking about how they're going to get up and down the court. They're going to press hard on defense. And then you saw glimpses of it when they were really successful. And when they got away from it last year, that's when they lost games and put up, 50s or 60s in the points category. Second one is going to be, can they find a 3-point shooter? We brought in a transfer with Chance Stevens. He has a shot of making on the court, I'm hearing, this year at some point, but can he really contribute much at that point? Where does he find his role? Can maybe one of these freshmen step up and really bring the scoring? Talked about, Don Carey, and that's my third point, kind of goes back to what he is. Can we keep guys that really aren't contributing off the floor and out of the rotation? Or are we going to find ourselves in that spot where a guy that's not a great defensive stopper and is meant to score is on the court because he can just play basketball at this level? Or have they brought in some of the depth between the freshmen, some of these transfers to keep those guys, when a guy's not playing well, they can really sit him down on the bench, and maybe if it's a starter, they get something close to 17 to 20 minutes. If it's a guy that's a rotational piece that you see have 13 minutes on a good night, maybe they get 3. Generally you can tell really quickly with rotational players what kind of night they're having, how the game rhythm is affecting them. Can Maryland get to the point of depth where we can bring in another guy maybe to fill that gap or adjust our game plan when the game is not going our way, instead of having to play the same 7 guys every game and really, only playing an 8th or a 9th guy when, Julian Reese has 4 fouls in the first half, for example. How can they find that depth with this team? And again, those are things that define your ability generally to win on the road when the whistle's not going your way, and win at home against opponents that have that edge and star player power that I think Maryland will have this year, but they don't have a Zach Edey as of right now.
No, they don't. I think the last point you made, and I think you hit the nail right on the head there. And for me, it was very hard to think about any other player than Noah Batchelor. I feel like that he's probably that second year guy where he's gonna possibly try and be that 3-point specialist, and I feel like that's maybe that guy where that kind of fits the description of kind of maybe that guy off the bench that just being able to kind of rely on that production. I think he definitely goes a long way in that.
Yeah, I think he fits that in a couple ways, actually, from my points. Is, he's one of those guys who's not really a strong suited game. He's supposed to be a dead on shooter. He's supposed to be that sharpshooter for this basketball team. And on a night where he comes off the bench, if he doesn't have that, maybe he's right back on there and you see him play 4 minutes. On a night where he's hot, he might get 20. Just having that flexibility, having those flex guys that can, really eat up minutes and have great games when they're hot and really not need to be out on the court when they're not doing what they do best. That seems to be key. And that's when kind of two things. One is that's when you're geared up to win, especially in March, because a guy like Batchelor or a guy like Stevens gets hot, in that time, and suddenly they're winning you games with their scoring ability. And at the same point, it allows you to say, okay, it gives more than one guy the opportunity to play, more than one guy the opportunity to take up minutes, develop all that stuff, keep them on the team, keep them out of the portal, because at least they know nights when they're having, when it's their day, there's no doubt they're going to be on the court. It serves you in many ways, especially with how far this team can go. I think we both agree if they get hot, they're a Sweet 16, Elite 8 team that can really push if things go their way. But also, they could be susceptible if the freshmen end up being really the contributors at the beginning of the year. Suddenly, you find yourself out in the first round because you have so many young guys on the court.
Yeah, I think that's definitely valid. I think what gives me a little bit more confidence, just kind of in Maryland's ability to kind of maybe take that next step and definitely be more consistent on the road. It's just Maryland's familiarity. I mean, just kind of having those vets come back and just kind of having freshmen. Again, the performances can, those can definitely vary, but I think the mentality, the day in day out, the habits, those seem to kind of give confidence. And then just having Jameer Young, obviously, just being able to be that facilitator, that ultra scorer inside and out. A little bit, obviously very dynamic, attacking the rim there. But you kind of mentioned just the freshmen there, and I think definitely a big part of Maryland's success this year hinges on just how impactful this freshman class is. But if we're going off Willard's word, he's feeling pretty good about them.
Yeah, and I think that's where we can leave it. Coach says, like they always do on media day, they paint a very, very positive picture. And I'm not saying that it's not a positive picture for Maryland basketball. I'm just saying basketball media day seems to be the most just positive about my team. The guys that I've got, the rotation that we've built all across the country. I've seen it at this point at 3 schools, and you hear the same things at all 3.
Yeah, it's definitely valid. It just feels like it just feels like a lot of what Willard does say. And granted, it's coach speak, and it's not even like just a Willard thing, just how coaches kind of are. But just feels like the public feedback matches what people privately say about DHS and Jamie Kaiser Jr. So I think that's that all of that overall alignment is a big reason why those guys are stepping into those freshman big time roles.
Yeah, 100%. I agree with you on Willard. He is on the. I enjoy Kevin Willard as a coach that speaks to the media. I don't really think I've seen a basketball coach quite like him that just will show up and take questions. You see him at events, and same thing. He's willing to answer, and when you ask something that he doesn't think is smart, he's not afraid to tell you that either.
Yeah, and we got a rare opening statement yesterday, so that was much appreciated. Starting year 2 off on the right note.
All right. Well, I don't really want to give any predictions. I will say I think that we both laid it out. We think that this team can get pretty far and will probably have that same up and down as many teams that have a lot. But I see it on the bright side. I'll throw it out there. I think it's a 24 plus win team. I really think they have that opportunity. I think they can get up and down the court, and if everybody stays healthy and things go well for them, I really don't think they'll be challenged in the non-conference, and I think they can push. I'll agree with you. I think they can push close to the top in the Big Ten, if not take a share of the regular season championship.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. Obviously, they kick off the season November 7th against Mount St. Mary's, and then they go right in that Asheville championship, or the Asheville tournament against Davidson. I think that early season matchup against Villanova, I wish that game, November 17th, I wish that game was maybe a week or 2 later. But they'll have UCLA a little bit after they kick off Big Ten play against Indiana, Penn State. But it just feels like there will be a couple opportunities. Obviously, that Villanova game will definitely be a big barometer just to kind of see what this Maryland team looks like. It will also probably be a weird feeling seeing Hakeem Hart not just playing against Maryland, but in a different uniform. It's probably like very similar feeling to how a lot of Maryland fans felt seeing Darryl Marcel in a Marquette uniform there. But I think Maryland will be able to kind of see early on, what this team kind of is. Um, and again, I think whether that this freshman class is kind of able to hit the ground running immediately, or if this team is able to kind of find a way to really hit its stride January, February, March, and kind of get hot into in tournament play. But in terms of expectations, I mean, obviously coming off a 22 win season last year, I think this team is more talented on paper. I think that there's obviously, just considering the freshman class, what they're able to do, I think there's just a lot more confidence in these guys being able to kind of impact the game in a number of different ways on both ends of the court. So I agree with you. I think 24, 25 wins is definitely reasonable there, but will be interesting to see kind of what Maryland looks like. Obviously, they got a couple non-conference games, not a crazy slate, obviously, in College Park, but a couple marquee games to kind of see, how does Maryland really stack up? And, if this is a Maryland team that we kind of think or maybe expect, then probably don't have to wait too long to see them in the top 25.
No, I don't think you will. I mean, look, we lack a little bit of those early season huge matchups, but you certainly have your UCLA, your Villanova, the Asheville championship. They're going to be competitive games. They're going to catch some eyes, and given where the Terps are kind of unofficially in the AP poll, I'll agree with you. I don't think it's long before they're ranked, and honestly, it's not long before the ball is tipped either. And we're going to have those combo pods coming at the end of the year where we're talking basketball and football. For all the Maryland basketball coverage that you need, check out InsideTheBlackandGold.net. You can catch all of Ahmed's insider coverage there. And of course, give this podcast a subscribe, a like. If you watch it on YouTube, subscribe to the Insider Black and Gold YouTube channel. And as always, you can catch all of our Terps coverage here. For Ahmed Gafir, I am Mason Viner. As always, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening.